and our protagonist of this manhwa is literally the owner of a tower, of a dungeon, and he has to keep everything right so that humans don't dominate her. And that's why he has his subordinates to help him in everything. I'm sure you'll like this manhwa, so leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and enjoy the video. In a world where dungeons are a constant stage for battle, humans often emerge victorious after confrontations. This is due to the fact that they can attack whenever they want, while the monsters, inhabitants of the dungeons, must always be ready to defend themselves. This unequal relationship means that humans have an advantage while monsters face the eternal pressure of being on alert. The repetition of these wars brings increasing wear and tear to the dungeons. With each conflict, they weaken, making them more vulnerable and susceptible to continuous attacks. And during a period when countless dungeons were invaded and created, there were exceptions. Some dungeons were impenetrable by humanity, a fact that, upon careful thought, became obvious. These dungeons were known as the malevolent dungeons, or, more precisely, the 7 malevolent dungeons. Each housed fearsome monsters and dark forces that surpassed any attempt at human invasion. The 7 malevolent dungeons, temporarily set aside by humanity and considered impossible to conquer, harbored incomparable dangers. However, even among them, there was one in particular, the core of the ancient, which was the most diabolical of all. This dungeon was protected by countless monsters that defended its secrets and by guardians who watched over 3 different paths. The red path on the left was defended by a homunculus, a creature made in the image of a blade called the blade made Renai. The central path, marked by the color blue, was defended by a skeleton known as the Death Knight, Patrick. The path to the right, contaminated by dirt and shadows, is shrouded in mystery. Without precise information about its dangers, it is more described as having an unknown number of tentacles. He who rules this impenetrable fortress and protects its secrets dwells at the core, observing and commanding its defenders from the shadows. An ancient monster, described in the first pages of the Empire's myth, emerges from the depths of history, surrounded by an ancient mystery. Its multiple eyes radiate incomprehensible power. His name is simple but terrifying, Swallow. Just as it was written in the books, he thought about this increase in invaders, and after spreading books like that among humans, as per Lord Slough's orders, the number of intruders who entered the dungeons has increased considerably, and maintaining those dungeons also required a strategy, and one had to be careful. One of the figures suggests that the dungeons were shrouded in mystery. Humans would not even consider invading them without knowing what was inside. However, it was very necessary to provide small information, making humans believe that there was something for them to enter those dungeons. These humans ran to the dungeons like moths running to the lights, without realizing that more than half of the information they have is false. This was a cunning trap to deceive them. Even with all the traps and false information spread, the number of intruders that invaded the dungeon exceeded expectations. The group of invaders was large, with a total of 74 of them, but they faced a crushing defeat. However, much of the equipment brought by these intruders was rendered useless, melted by the 116 black tentacles that attacked it, leaving few usable items that, although valuable, became scarce. That girl hugging the book thought that if Rihanna was present, she would have dealt with the invaders without damaging those valuable items. The dark creature at her side, with an air of irony, responds nonchalantly by disagreeing with her. As he laughs in the shadows, a black vortex begins to form, suggesting that something else was about to happen. An unknown guy appears and approaches Henai, extending his hand while chains of darkness envelop the environment. He touches her head calmly and confidently, stating that she would undoubtedly have been able to handle the situation. Soon after, a playful skeleton appears, making an observation about the meeting, questioning whether everyone was there for a simple meeting or to have fun. The surprised playful skeleton asks why the other two aren't so excited. He sarcastically comments that the surrounding weather was so sweet that it could even give him cavities. However, he begins to think that it would not just be his teeth that would rot but his entire skull. In a very relaxed tone, he points to the boss, mentioning that if he was going to transform, he should do it correctly, highlighting that when touching Renai, he has 6 fingers on his hand. The surprised boss looks at his hand and confirms that it did, in fact, have 6 fingers. Patrick, the skeleton, continues his fun conversation, mentioning that this time he was much better than the last time when he had more than 40 teeth. He comments that when he smiled, it was enough to send shivers down the spines of anyone around him. With all the loud noise of his jaw beating, it bothered Renai, who showed her frustration with the situation. Internally, she was thinking it was very frustrating, considering giving up her role as guardian. However, she soon recovers and decides to get straight to the point, opening her book seriously to address the main topic of the meeting. She begins to inform the other guardians, mentioning that humans have finally started using the path to the right. However, this caused a serious problem. The 116 black tentacles defending this path suffered critical injuries during the clash. Therefore, the situation was a little more delicate. And despite this, one of the figures present minimizes the concern by stating that the regenerative power of the tentacles was very impressive and could watch over them for a long time. And if their conditions don't improve, he suggests looking for another guardian to take on the role of defending the path. The boss decides it was time to devise a counterattack, a strategy, and change defense assignments. He tells Hanai, who until then was protecting the red path, to take care of the infected path, in this case on the right, where the humans were concentrating. He explains that the subjugation teams would probably believe there is an opening along that path, so he needs Renai to secure that area. And with confident determination, Renai claims she can handle any amount of humans, ready to defend the dungeon under Lord Swallow's orders. The chief then assigns Patrick to take care of the red path that was previously protected by Renai. The surprised Patrick questions why he had been chosen for this task. The boss explains that when the humans realize that Renai was on the infected path, they will switch to their direction, in which case they would focus on the red path, and Patrick would be there to defend it. And the boss concludes that with this new strategy, they would be able to defend themselves from 2 attacks at the same time. But Patrick was still a little confused, trying to reason with his boss about his new task. And when asked what to do if the humans decide to take the central path, the boss calmly responds that in that case, they would have a direct encounter with him. In other words, the boss himself would defend this place. Patrick, perplexed, questions the logic of this plan. But Renai, full of enthusiasm, finds the idea absolutely perfect, praising Lord Swallow. Due to his genius, Patrick, in disbelief, finds himself confused by the situation and admits that he no longer understands anything. After resolving the main issue, Renai mentions that they now needed to deal with the sword that the leader of the subjugation group used. The boss looks confused without remembering what he was talking about. Patrick then explains that it is a sword used by the human leader, which demonstrated considerable strength. Even with the explanation, the leader still does not understand or remember what it was. Patrick finds the sword and raises it, mentioning that it was a 36 virtuous work. The weapons famous among humans, he believes this to be the 14th, called Tanabla. As Patrick explains, the boss was still distracted, vaguely remembering the 36 masterpieces, although he confuses the name, calling it the 36 martispices. In a joking tone, Patrick doesn't like it at all and runs out of patience. He corrects the boss, saying that it is the 36 virtuous works. He also mentions that the blade Renai was using is also one of these 36 works. He was thinking about these weapons that humans brought. He asks the boss what he should do with the recovered sword. He commented that it would be very problematic if humans recovered it. He said that leaving it near a monster at the entrance would not be a great idea, as it would probably be taken back. Patrick, tired of thinking about options, suggests that the boss should keep the sword. However, the boss asks why Patrick, who also uses a sword, doesn't use one instead. Surprisingly excited, Patrick asks if he could really use it. After confirming his permission, he is visibly excited with a smile, accepting the sword, declaring that by order of the boss he had no choice but to use it. But you know he wanted to use it. At the heart of the dungeon known as the Core of the Ancient resides a fearsome homunculus handmaiden, and a death knight who exudes an aura of death. In addition to them, an ancient giant monster was also part of this location. As the boss reflected on this, he commented to Patrick that he already gave away that sword. and he waits for him to tear up the resignation letter he had hidden inside his ribcage, making it clear that he would not allow her to leave so easily. And at the core of the former, each member has its own peculiar characteristic. Renai is described as a devoted sunflower whose only concern is Swallow. Patrick, on the other hand, is the only one with a conscience in the dungeon and an expert at questioning his boss. And Swallow, an ancient monster, is described as the very incarnation of laziness, a being that avoids as much as possible any effort that exists on planet Earth. While discussing what to do with the remaining profits, Renai asks Swallow, what would be the best way to use them? Swallow responds that they should continue doing what they always do, use what they could, and use what is not useful as bait for the next enemies. An excited Henaya steps in to take care of the distribution, while Patrick looks on skeptically, imagining that the work would be done incompletely once again. Henny was starting to think about the fact that there weren't many monsters in Larmora that needed magical items. Then she suggested the possibility of selling these mana stones, believing that this could generate a good amount of money. The delivered Swallow commented that it had been a long time since something like this had been done. Patrick thought that he himself should go to Villa dos Nossos to make this sale. When Patrick suggests that Renai go to the village of humans, everyone is surprised by the idea, and Patrick comments that she would be the best choice at that moment, while the boss remembers that Renai wasn't that skilled at transforming into a human. Still, Patrick insists, and the slightly reluctant boss ends up agreeing, but on one condition: she should bring back lots of tasty things, food, etc. The day was clear and sunny as Renai walked to her mission, and upon arriving at Human Village, she ended up going to a store. She wanted to try to sell those mana stones, but the owner of the establishment refused, claiming that the stones that Henny had brought were too powerful to be sold there, as no one would be able to use them. He mentions that only a jeweler in the capital or a magic tower with an Imperial rope could handle such a product. Henny reflects on the difficulty of the situation. The capital was very far away, and she did not want to go to a magical tower. However, for the sake of Lord Swallow, she decides that she will face this journey, despite her fears. After making this decision, she says goodbye to the merchant and leaves the store. The owner of the establishment notices that she had left something behind and calls her. However, the girl told him that what he thought she had forgotten was just a tip, and she ends up grateful for the information that the store owner ended up giving her, and she leaves without saying goodbye formally. The owner of the place, very surprised by the unusual attitude, watches the girl leaving and comments to himself that she was a strange girl. The hooded young woman ends up heading towards a tower under the sky. As she gets closer, she thinks about human nature itself. She enters the magic tower room, where she is received by the tower members. They question her about the reason for her visit, and upon learning that she was there to sell mana stones, they end up instructing her to speak to the guild master. She ends up accepting the guidance without much ceremony and is led through the tall corridors of the tower. One of the tower members offers to guide her to the office, and together they begin to climb the stairs towards the top where the leader of the tower resides. As she was guided through the corridors of the magic tower, she began to think about how human towers resemble dungeons. Following the guide, she finally arrived at her destination, where she was greeted by the wing leader, the leader of the magic tower, Gromit Ismur. She thanks the young woman for coming up there and introduces herself formally. When Gromit asks who she was, she identifies herself as Ren and introduces herself. Meanwhile, Gromit silently assesses Ren's mana, realizing that it is considerably impressive for a human. The leader of the tower wing, Gromit, initially doesn't think much of her, considering her as a child. However, when informed by the guard about the amount of mana stones she brought, she became even more interested in the visit. She commented on the reputation of the tower and hoped that the stones that Ren brought were of high quality and compatible with their status. Ren, without saying much, reveals the mana stones she brought, leaving Gromit surprised by the beauty and quantity of stones shining intensely before his eyes. Gromit observes the mana stones in amazement without realizing that they are of rank a classification, something rare and of very high quality. She recognizes that they are all comparable to the best mana stones out there. This leaves her very surprised, and Gromitz couldn't believe that a child would have something so valuable in his possession. She questions Ren about the origin of the stones, showing a lot of distrust, and it was obvious. While wondering who that mysterious child really was, Gromitz starts to put the pieces together when he looks at Ren's silver hair. She remembers that she is from a family among the 8 great houses of the Empire, recognized for having members with silver hair. The leader of the tower begins to consider the possibility that Aram could be a fugitive daughter of this noble house, and that she has secretly brought mana stones. And while thinking this, she can't imagine another way this young girl could have so many high-ranked mana stones. In her mind, she recognizes that the world could be bleak, especially for a noblewoman outside her safe environment. Gromit apologizes for his earlier rudeness, acknowledging that he underestimated the quantity and quality of mana stones. She informed that her wing of the tower was interested in buying all the stones and proposed a price of 50 ounces of gold for each one, offering up to 80 ounces for those of better quality. Aram began to think about this offer, aware that 50 ounces of gold are an immense amount. This was enough for a common Peblu to take 10 years to accumulate the value of a single stone. The proposal, although tempting, makes clear the extraordinary value of the stones he possesses. But she ends up showing confidence and coldness, saying that Gromitz couldn't play like that because it would be dangerous. It is obvious that Gromitz, scared, realizes that Ren has a much greater understanding than she was imagining. She admits that, even using all the money in the tower wing, it wouldn't be possible to buy all those mana stones that Ren had. And she, in turn, said simply that she should buy as many as she could, keeping her gaze intense and challenging, pressuring her to make the best deal possible. Gromitz presents a chest containing 2,000 gold pieces, explaining that this was all they had available. Yara proposes a deal, also offering items of great value along with gold, on the condition of receiving all those mana stones. Ren, attentive to the offer, questions the quality of those additional items, emphasizing that they should be easy to sell. The confident Gromitz guarantees that she wouldn't need to worry about that, trying to reassure her about the value of the merchandise offered. Gromitz invites Rin to follow her to show the valuable items she had mentioned. She takes her to a restricted area, normally off-limits to outside visitors. However, she makes an exception for Rin, treating her with respect due to her ongoing negotiating power. They arrive at a storeroom in the tower, a place where the most valuable items are stored. Gromitz prepares to show off the tower's treasures, trying to impress Ren with what she could offer in exchange for the mana stones. Gromitz begins to display the valuable items he planned to offer, and the first was a tiara made of 4-carat diamonds, with a small mana stone embedded in it, making it especially useful for mages. She then reveals a living black pearl, a masterpiece of alchemy, which allowed crying sounds whenever the bearer approached poisons, a valuable ability for any user. Spider, upon seeing the pearl, is surprised to realize that it was created through alchemy, which further increased the value of the item. Your integrated reaction is observed by Gromitz, who keeps your decision in relation to the treasures presented. Gromitz notices Ren's hesitation regarding the alchemy items and a little nervously asks if it wasn't what she wanted, recognizing that alchemy was not something practiced nor well accepted by everyone. Then she ends up presenting another item, hoping to impress her even more. The Crimson Love Stone, a legendary jewel that supposedly fulfills the owner's desire for love. Aaron reacts in shock upon hearing the power of the stone, becoming extremely interested. The idea of a jewel that can turn love into a reality leaves Aaron surprised and with great expectations. Gromitz explains that by infusing mana with the Crimson Love Stone in front of someone the person likes, the spirit inside the jewel will bring eternal love between the two. Aram, visibly surprised and excited, asks if this would really work with anyone, which Gromitz confidently swears by the name of the magical tower she possessed, that this jewel indeed had this power, and Gromitz asks Aram if that jewel was to his liking. Aram, without hesitation, states with conviction that this was the jewel she desired, showing her absolute interest in the power promised by the stone. A lightly laughing Gromitz explains that unlike other items, the Crimson Lovestone jewelry is extremely valuable, as it could even win the heart of an emperor. which is why he considered the stone to be something of incalculable value, which makes it very difficult to include in the errant agreement. Aram, surprised and a little frustrated, reacts to the comment, trying to deal with the situation. She then questions Gromit, asking what would be needed or what she could offer in exchange for that special jewel. Gromit is completely surprised and scared to see that Ren showed so much interest in this jewel. She wonders how she got such an item that seems of great value and power. Ren continues confidently, saying that in addition to all the other mana stones that she showed earlier, she possessed another extremely valuable item. And without hesitation, Rin makes a clear and direct demand. She wants the Crimson Love Stone jewelry in exchange for everything she was offering. In an office scene, one of the assistants was in a hurry and questions the guild master about what she had done. He was shocked to learn that she actually handed over the valuable crystal. Desperately, he warned that if that child left with that item, he would certainly die. But Gromit, however, remained calm and unconcerned, nonchalantly responding to her assistant's concern. She mentions that the naive young noblewoman personally exchanged the item she desired, and she was still considering the crystal expensive. Then, having made the deal, she seems not to be worried about what was about to happen. Gromit, with an evil smile, assures that there would be no problems, as that unlucky girl would die as soon as the curse was activated. And she even mentions that the person the girl likes would be affected, and they would both disappear without a trace. Meanwhile, Aram was walking along the road. She was holding the cursed item. Gromit was thinking that she didn't know who that person was that Rin had these feelings for, and felt very sorry for that person since they were both destined to die. And the story moves to one of the 7 evil dungeons, Shaikai's castle, a place surrounded by a dark and macabre atmosphere. Inside the castle, a terrifying figure wields enormous scissors. He watched his victim with a cruel gaze. She commented coldly on the state of the spikes, referring to the imminent and inevitable end that awaited those who were not under her curse. While he was sitting, she takes care of his hair, speaking with familiarity and affection. Aaron feels indebted for all the help he always gives her. But the owner of the dungeon, with a smile, says that it is normal for neighbors to help each other. She expresses her admiration for Aaron, revealing that she loves seeing her and finds her adorable. Elizabeth continues with her task, saying he will be beautiful, regardless of what he did. As Eris and Beth continue to take care of Ren, she comments on how moments like this make her envious of the homunculi, who never age. She was thinking about Ren's unchanging beauty, praising the fact that his face would never show signs of aging. And Ren, in turn, begins to look at Eris and Beth's reflection in the mirror, noticing that she also looks very young and that her skin is even paler than Renai's. And she makes this observation while continuing to be attended to by this Elizabeth. Elizabeth jokingly commented that the more she used beauty products and blood daily to maintain her appearance. Meanwhile, Aaron hesitates and asks a question about how Elizabeth thought Renai was at that moment. She watched intently as Ren, blushing, praised Renai, stating that she was the prettiest girl he had seen recently. Elizabeth states and guarantees that Ren, with her current appearance, no one would be able to reject her while she fixes it. And she jokes, asking Ren to whom she would confess all this love. Aaron, holding the Crimson Love Stone with determination, seemed determined to make her confession to our prota. Aaron enthusiastically said that he would confess his feelings, and Elizabeth was joking that she didn't believe that she would really do that. And upon realizing that Aaron was actually serious, Elizabeth panics and begins quickly explaining that she was just making a joke and didn't know it was true. And she desperately questions who this person was that Aaron was going to confess to, completely taken by the curiosity of knowing who it was. Aram, with her eyes shining and passionate, reveals that the person she wants was Lord Swallow. Upon hearing this, Elizabeth is completely confused. She didn't even know how to react in that situation, and she tried to understand what she just heard, asking if Aram was joking or talking. Since she was very serious, she commented that because he was a homunculus, Rin was perhaps making a ridiculous joke. With a very serious expression, increasing the confusion, Rin determinedly stated that it wasn't a joke at all and that she was really going to confess to Lord Swallow that she was in love. Elizabeth, still confused, asks if she really liked Lord Swallow, finding it difficult to find him attractive. Ren, however, appears enchanted, highlighting that there were many things about him that she admired, especially his strength, while Elizabeth, with a tired expression, recognizes that in fact, he was very strong. He was the strongest entity in the world, but still in disbelief with Ren's passion, and despite her admiration for Ren, for her strength of Lord Swallow. Elizabeth quickly points out that all of his qualities are nullified by the extreme laziness he possessed, and she remembers that he was big, lazy, ate a lot, and spent the whole day sleeping without doing anything. King, however, she said that she would love to continue with these defects of Lord Swallow, like the fact that he snores, is insensitive, and has recently gained weight. And even so, Ren still seemed enchanted with him. Elizabeth, surprised by Ren's devotion, concluded to herself that it was over. She was in love. Despite all these problems, Ren really liked Lord Swallow, and that was just the way he was. Aram confirms her feelings by admitting that she really loved him, and Elizabeth, understanding, wishes her good luck, but comments that she deserved someone better. Still, she offers to be there in case he rejected her. An emotional Aram thanks Elizabeth for her support and promises that he would try, holding tightly to the object that signaled his love. At the same time, the scene shifts to the Imperial capital, Lias, where a dungeon subjugation coalition was gathered. In a grand room, red flags decorated the place, and his conversation revolved around the group's belief in the hero Byrne's subjugation. He was involved in several important events. A serious meeting was taking place inside the capital. They said that the subjugation led by the hero Byrne was literally annihilated, and the news takes everyone by surprise, as the group had supposedly defeated the Guardian with ease. Disbelief dominates the room. Everyone is afraid, questioning how this tragedy could be true. They wanted to confirm this, many doubt. That's why the situation was very serious, and everyone was really leading us to believe that the hero really was killed. In a formal room, an older man started a conversation with another in a cape, mentioning something that could have been wrongly assumed. The focus of the discussion then shifts to the issue of the sword, one of the 36 virtuous masterpieces. The man in the cape is told that at least they can return to the area. The 14th virtuoso work, Tenebla, could not be recovered, and the seriousness of the situation is evident since the monsters had this weapon. They suggest hurrying up and trying to resolve this issue. However, another voice appears, discouraging the idea of going to the dungeon and trying to retrieve this weapon. And he said that even though Byrne's subjugation team failed to defeat the threat, the proposal to abandon the mission is suggested with the aim of avoiding further unnecessary sacrifices for a weapon that would not be very useful for now. One of the men refuses to give up on it and hypothesizes that the boss monsters could be seriously injured since the hero Byrne had faced these monsters. He believes that the enemy must be recovering from their injuries and suggests that they reorganize and attack with all their strength. I thought it was very dangerous, and the tension continues in the room with everyone afraid of Prota. The seemingly pressured leader begins to sweat and thinks about the loss of one of the Imperial family's precious masterpieces in addition to the important hero. The failure of a second team could have disastrous consequences, leading to severe punishment, and he was afraid it would turn out really bad. The fury of the Imperial family would fall upon them, pointing their blades in retaliation. As the discussion continues, one of the characters begins to reflect internally on the possibility that Byrne, the hero, may not have been able to seriously injure the boss monster of the Old One's core. He imagines a worst-case scenario where the subjugation team was not even able to affect the dungeon in any meaningful way. And if those fears were true, no matter how many times they tried to challenge him, it would be impossible to conquer the dungeon, the core of the dungeon old. The realization of this thought weighs on the characters, while the leader announces that, with these conditions, it would be impractical. One of the older characters seems surprised and uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation, and he was listening intently but remained silent. Then, someone curiously questions why the other believes that the dungeon could be easily conquered. The answer comes confidently, with the black-caped figure firmly stating his belief that the dungeon could be easily dominated. Everyone is surprised, especially when someone mentions the presence of the Imperial Magical Research Association, suggesting that something unusual or unexpected was happening. known as the Third Eye, they enter the scene. One of them, smiling in a disturbing way, asked if those present knew whose orders they followed, revealing the weight of the authority under which they acted. Those who seem to lead the group claim that their presence indicates that the sins committed will be paid for by referring to the mistakes they had committed. He continues to accuse those responsible for the death of the honored hero, and even worse, for having let one of the precious virtuous masterpieces of the Imperial Majesty fall into the hands of his enemies. And a gloomy atmosphere begins to weigh down the room. The character thought about the possibility of killing all of them present, but quickly concluded that this would result in a big problem, as there was no one to coordinate the Empire's numerous subjugation teams, and this dilemma could be a form of manipulation. One of the members of the Imperial Magical Research Association, with a very sinister smile, reassures those present by mentioning to His Majesty that he had made a proposal to allow them to live, and the pressure kept growing. Everyone was panicking, mentioning that Sir Burnt was unable to complete the mission, and he questioned how they, who are weaker, could succeed where the hero failed. At that moment, the figure of the Imperial Dark Association of Magical Research pronounces the word Nifrin, which generates a murmur of surprise among everyone there, as well as confusion. The characters started gossiping among themselves, trying to understand the meaning of this word, wondering if they heard right. One of the men remembers that Nifrin is a hybrid with some problems, a creature that apparently carries great risks. The mention of Nifrin causes tension in the room. The member of the Imperial Association of Magical Research confidently asserts that Niflheim is not a failed product, but rather an undisputed success, and he ends up asking the intriguing question: why Byrne, the hero, and his team were unable to survive. The ancient core suggests that it was not due to weakness or recklessness. Faced with this question, the room becomes silent to listen, and the answer is given by the same man, who points out that there was something missing in Sir Burns and his team. A revelation paves the way for more mysteries about what it would take to triumph and dominate, leaving those present uneasy. The mysterious figure mentions that only one thing was missing for Byrne and his team, one thing that was in Nifrin's hands. When pronouncing the name Nifrin, a blonde character appears on the scene with an air of confidence and mystery. He is ordered to ensure that the Ancient's core attack is successful this time. Meanwhile, the scene cuts to a character making an explosive sneeze. Our protagonist felt a strange sensation, sensing that something was very bad about to happen, and he feels as if a big storm is approaching, which increases his anxiety even more. However, he wonders if he was getting the flu by playing around with the situation. As a terrifying, lumbering creature manifests in front of him, our prota encounters the core of the Ancient Guardian, surrounded by tentacles and a creature known as 16 Tentacles. He thought about this situation, regretting that there was nothing he could do at the moment. Just wait. He goes to the next room, where the administrator of the fifth room, Anton Pafago, the guard, was trying to remember something important about this opponent, keeping an eye on what was coming. The protagonist climbs between the rocks and thinks about Anton Pafago's regeneration ability, which can recover by itself by regenerating as long as its main body is intact and has enough nutrients, of course. He confirms that its main body was still alive and concludes that, without needing to intervene, the creature would recover on its own. After this realization, he prepares to continue on his way, jumping off the rocks and thinking that the real trouble was to come as he advances to the next phase of the journey. He thought about the events of the first 4 rooms where the beings were massacred and realized that he would need to discuss this with Patrick. Although he already knew that he would be reprimanded for the same, he decided to postpone this conversation for now, as he didn't want to be scolded. Feeling tired too, he noted that so far he had only investigated the sewer path and room 5, but he was already satisfied with the results obtained so far, and the protagonist, confident that Patrick would understand his actions, ends his patrol with the feeling of having completed his duty. However, he is quickly surprised by an unexpected presence, something that surrounds him and catches his attention. A wave of hostility arises in his mind, revealing his contempt for the humans he considered filthy. The atmosphere around him becomes very heavy. As the protagonist walks, a threatening presence surrounds him. A voice echoes in his mind, warning him that at that moment he entered that place and would not come out alive. However, he soon realizes Kim confronts him and is actually something familiar. Mr. Swallow, a person, quickly appears apologizing for his hostile attitude. He was visibly distressed, thinking he was some cunning human, but he soon realized his mistake and apologized, clearly sorry for having confused him with a human. And after the initial outbreak, Prota comments that this was just a small shock, trying to calm the situation. However, he quickly changes the subject, noticing something different about Renai, questioning if she was getting dressed. Surprised and excited, Renai expresses her joy that he noticed her new appearance, showing great happiness. Prota, on the other hand, seemed nervous and confused, suggesting that she seemed to be dressed for a special occasion, while he thought speculating that she was about to hand in a letter of resignation to Patrick. Renai states that she was really dressed for a special occasion, making the protagonist very nervous. She then asks for a moment of more attention, which makes him internally panic, imagining the worst, especially the possibility of a letter of resignation. Amidst his nervousness, he quickly agrees to listen to her, but in his thoughts, he desperately hopes that it be anything except a resignation letter, fearing it. And Renai takes the protagonist to a special place, which she reveals to be her secret hiding place. She invited him to sit and promised to bring tea, while he, nervous, continued thinking quickly that she didn't hand in her resignation. And when serving tea, Hannah commented that this place used to be hers alone, but now it's a secret shared between the two, and the protagonist responds hesitantly, still caught up in his own thoughts about what was to come. Renate begins to speak, while the extremely nervous protagonist continues to have a worsening mental state. Please don't resign. She mentions that it has been 80 years since he took her in, which surprises the prota, and he hesitates when the questioner remembers this. He responds affirmatively, even though his expression says quite the opposite. He remembers how 80 years ago, a wave of dungeon subjugation drove thousands of humans to the ancient core, and this was the period when Renai won the title and began to grow in status. He was thinking about everything she went through, and in the midst of these thoughts, he asks about the condition of Renai's right eye. To his relief, she wasn't about to quit, and he sighs in relief. Renai, in turn, expresses her happiness at the fact that he remembers what happened years ago because of his eye, which makes her very happy. And the girl revealed that she was very happy to protect him, and it was more like a farewell than a simple declaration. And that's why he gets very nervous. He was totally desperate, and he insists that the farewell doesn't happen. The girl makes a delicate confession, revealing that she likes him, making him very surprised, and his expression changes completely. He seems speechless for a few moments, processing all that. The girl continues confessing that she waited 80 years for that moment. Her face was very flushed, demonstrating the emotion she was feeling for him, and he tried to respond hesitantly, suggesting that maybe he should start calmly, still visibly very shaken. And finally, although surprised and still trying to process it all, she thanks him for hearing the confession, and the young man begins thinking about this uncertain life that they both don't want to live alone. The spider admits that she knew the weight of her confessions. It would be very heavy, but she couldn't carry that burden alone. While Prota finds himself divided, not knowing whether he should accept or reject these feelings, fearing the consequences of both paths, Renai, determined to love Lord Swallow, declares that she will do whatever is necessary by holding a shiny heart-shaped object, and he, very surprised, realizes that Renai was willing to go too far to make this wish come true. She believed that with this object, her wish would finally be fulfilled, while Lord Swallow observed everything, recognizing that the item was something very dangerous. She ends up infusing her mana into that object, but notices a darkness forming around it. The Prota wonders, in shock and disbelief, if Renai really tried to kill him. It's not possible, and the atmosphere was very heavy. A presence appearing as a surprised and trembling Renai faced the threatening gaze of a dark entity. Renai was holding that heart-shaped object, but something unexpected happened. The heart began to fragment, breaking into pieces as she watched in shock. With her eyes wide open, Henny doesn't understand what was happening, why all this was happening, becoming very scared and confused. And with a broken heart, a dark creature appears, emitting a frightening sound. The environment fills with a dark aura as the malevolent entity takes shape. and the skeleton ends up appearing. He seemed to admire his boss a lot, commenting and joking about the boss's ruthless way of handling the situation, even pushing Renai away. He expresses surprise at the boss's brutality, to the point where his jaw can't stop making noise. The skeleton was talking to another figure, apparently asking for advice on what to do and how to resolve this situation. Although he recognizes that he caused the problem, the skeleton confronts Renai, accusing her of being responsible for a very big problem, but she denies it, saying that she doesn't remember what happened. The skeleton, with a threatening smile, offers her help to remind her. The skeleton begs the boss to calm down as an intense fight appears to be unfolding. The scene changes to the boss, enveloped in black and purple energy, and in the midst of a fierce battle. At the same time, Renai appears performing a mysterious action, while the skeleton watches in surprise and confusion, trying to understand what she just did with that glowing heart. The skeleton tries to bring Renai back to her senses, asking her to control herself and get out of that situation. He prepares to face the danger alone, realizing that Renai in her current state was just getting in the way. In a quick action, the skeleton pushes her away, making an impact and apologizing because there was no other way to deal with the situation, leaving Renai injured and coughing after the blow. The skeleton manages to create distance between himself and the monster, but finds himself unsure of what to do next. As he thinks, a menacing presence appears, questioning whether he was also trying to kill her. The very scared skeleton reacts to being confronted by the creature with piercing eyes. He questioned whether she really didn't remember her actions. The visibly regretful creature quickly admits his mistake, which pleases the skeleton. He understood the creature's reaction. Then the scene ends up changing to the fragments of the broken glowing heart on the floor. The skeleton discusses the need to find Renai, with a feeling of doubt about what to do, and the creature suggests that Patrick would probably think it would be a bad idea, but he recognizes Renai's importance to the functioning of the dungeon. She has always taken care of and continues to take care of several essential tasks, such as managing food, cleaning, and repairing traps, in addition to her dealing with complaints from other monsters. And the creature admits that losing Renai would be much more devastating for the dungeon than the absence of the boss himself. The skeleton, although very aware of her importance, is surprised to hear this, and that's why Prota orders the young woman to find Renai before it's too late, until he humiliates himself, if necessary, to get her back. The reluctant young man agrees, and the skeleton hands over a bracelet called Mura, which helps stabilize mana. Although Prota was confused about using that item, the skeleton only mentions that it is expensive, asking him to use it and be careful not to lose it. And he explained that although the bracelet is useful for stabilizing mana, he is not sure if it would work on the young man, on the Prota, due to his body being resistant to this type of influence. Even so, the bracelet could prevent greater damage. The young man, surprised by the level of preparation, asks where the skeleton got the item, and he casually responds that he just picked it up off the ground. Then the skeleton asks Prota to take good care of the bracelet, as it was a fragile item, and Prota promises to try, and Patrick reminds him to return in 5 days, as the humans would be back. Prota confirms that he must return before the subjugation group arrives, to which Patrick responds affirmatively, guaranteeing that he will have 5 days of safety. Patrick also asks the young man not to forget this, highlighting that this period is the maximum time that they can guarantee the safety of the dungeon. Prota, filled with urgency, agrees and prepares for the task that was to come. That's why Prota sets out on her journey, promising to return with Renai within 5 days. The slightly worried skeleton advises not to attract so much attention if he passes through a human village, reminding him that it would be a bit problematic if the monsters in the dungeon were seen by humans. But Prota confidently responds by saying that if things went wrong, he will cause chaos and return. The desperate skeleton yells at him to stop trying to be so nice as he leaves, and after that, the skeleton sighed, realizing that the situation was becoming more complicated than he expected, and so he thought about Henade's decision to give the Praying Fang, an extremely powerful item. which was now being auctioned. This action almost resulted in a death, as the boss lost control upon learning of this, and the skeleton anticipates the chaos that his boss will find out about this news. Imagining the catastrophe, the creature, furious at his side, reacts with great anger to see an apocalypse if things get out of control. The skeleton, after reading something unexpected in his book, is shocked. Upon checking the information, he finds that the Dungeon Subjugation Coalition is confident of reaching the core of the ancient dungeon in just 3 days. This makes him immediately remember the previous words that assured him that the place would be safe for 5 days. Now realizing his miscalculation, he panics upon learning that the danger was much closer than he thought. Meanwhile, in another location, the young man is seen lying in a crater in the ground, and this hole was made because of the impactful retraction, with dust being raised around it. He was still recovering from his movements because of that abrupt fall. When he got up from the crater, he realized that he was teleported to a random location for the second time. He started to think about the mess that mana is in his body, as the skeleton had warned him, recommending that he avoid using magic. However, he decides to try one more time, as the coordinates lead to another place where Henny went to sell the mana stones. Even though he is aware of the risks, he prepares to try magic again in search of Henny. He teleports to the city of Haston. In another location, a demonic figure sitting on the majestic throne recognizes the effort of a human who arrived there, promising a glorious death. The proud figure mocks the Prota, but he responds sarcastically, highlighting the demon's exaggerated confidence. He claims that his subjugement corps is experienced and ranked among the best in the Empire, ready to face that threat. The leader of the mercenary group, Down Tiger, presents himself in a confident manner, saying that his name would be known by everyone on the continent. He defies the demonic figure, claiming that they have come to overthrow him from his throne. However, the demonic figure responds with contempt by calling them insolent fools and revealing her identity as the 17th descendant of the demon king Asmodeus, making it clear that they are facing a powerful force. The descendant of Asmodeus reveals her name, Mel's of Lymph, Agria, surrounding an aura of purple power, and proclaims that those who hear her name must die gloriously. The leader of the mercenaries responds confidently, stating that he will return her words directly to her, as they both prepare for an intense battle. The battle continues with intensity. Lymph Agria's Emils easily blocks his opponent's attack, while the mercenaries adjust their strategy, with one of them offering support to the leader. Emils Furiosa despises that human for not being able to recognize his place, and, in a fit of rage, conjures purple flames, threatening to burn and make everyone disappear. The force of the attack spreads violently across the battlefield, forcing the mercenaries to defend themselves against the demon's devastating onslaught. The leader of the mercenaries continued to face Milo's power, blocking the devastating attack with difficulty. However, the situation becomes complicated when ice particles unexpectedly begin to manifest around the fight. Surprised, the leader realizes that things were getting out of his control, exclaiming in shock at the unshakable strength of that demon. The fight between the mercenaries and the demonic descendant of Amos Deus continued to be intense. The powerful demon uses ice attacks and devastating magic to attack the mercenaries. However, the mercenaries appeared prepared, with one of the leaders using a quick and fierce technique, launching a counterattack. The demonic leader, although confident in her superiority, realizes that she had really underestimated the humans, especially after thinking that she had already defeated the group's support mage. However, in an unexpected move, the leader of the mercenary group resurfaces and continues fighting with determination. While the mercenaries put pressure on that demon, she becomes very angry, intensifying her attacks and launches several even more powerful spells. The mercenaries continued to try to dodge and counterattack, fighting for their lives while facing the immense power of the Demon King's daughter. One of the warriors assists their leader, who was slightly injured, ensuring that he can continue to fight. The group was thinking about who the new force that appeared could be, as they were unaware of another subjugation team present at the location. Meanwhile, the demon watches attentively, a little disturbed by the unexpected presence, questioning who this new mysterious opponent who has entered the scene could be. Amidst the chaos and destruction, the Prota appears, surrounded by smoke and shadows. he was slowly approaching in a devastated landscape. That demon looked at the Prota with surprise as the Prota appeared. She looked for answers. Soon our Prota appears exhausted, questioning Hastings' whereabouts, and the two characters watched with very surprised expressions. Then they began to exchange verbal confrontations, where the protagonist mentioned the Demon King. He warns others to stay away from this powerful entity. The Demon King, a powerless figure with powers enveloped in purple energy, displays confidence, stating that no human would be able to defeat him. Prota, thinking about the situation, realizes that the Demon King was different from the others he has encountered before. The Demon King, full of arrogance, promises to show his power to those he considers scum, and at that moment, the support squad arrives to reinforce the battle led by a determined commander. They decide to unite to defeat the Demon King. However, the protagonist hesitates to try to alert the group, but he is ignored amid the excitement of the reinforcements. The humans prepare their attacks, confident that the Demon King's magic would not affect them. The Prota mentions Hastings' name. Even so, the group of humans continues to advance, certain that their advantage meets newly arrived support, and the battle was about to get much darker, with the Demon King preparing to demonstrate his true power. The battle continues, with the group of Zumanos desperately trying to hurt the Demon King, but the protagonist was running, tired and frustrated, thinking about the situation. He was already tired of the mess, and he had to go find Renai too. But the confusion around him made it very difficult, and now with a group fully immersed in combat, he knows it would be difficult to talk to them, and he really couldn't be late because Patrick would obviously fight with him. And in his moment of anger, Prota ends up kind of scolding everyone because he was out of patience. Meanwhile, Prota was calm and confident, walking towards chaos, showing that he was about to act decisively. After the confrontation, a female figure observes in shock the power she had just witnessed. She, visibly shaken, questions the protagonist about what he just did. In awe, she recognizes the overwhelming strength he had, allowing him to be even more powerful than she imagined. She was enchanted. Her expression quickly changed to a mixture of excitement, let's say, showing her great interest in meeting you, Prota, with her eyes shining with curiosity and admiration, and she was now fascinated, starting to bombard the protagonist with questions about his true identity, his strength, his name, and a desperate attempt to know more about him. But the Prota remains silent, maintaining a serious expression. Realizing the exaggeration of the approach, the character quickly recovers, apologizing for her lack of manners. Soon she presents herself in a grandiose way, revealing herself as the powerful Demon King, being the 17th descendant of Asmodeus. With pride in her lineage, she also exuberantly introduced herself, revealing her name, Melts, with great enthusiasm. She excitedly asks about his name, hoping for some answer. But Prota reveals his discontent, making it clear that he hates everything that was happening there. Even so, thinking about the usefulness of providing information, he tries to invent a false name and hesitates right in the middle, realizing that perhaps he had messed up in the process. He thought about the situation, remembering that Patrick fought with him not to reveal his true identity, and he decides there was no need to reveal who he really was. He would come up with the name on the spur of the moment, Swald Ronier. Despite finding the name strange, he tries to maintain his composure, laughing nervously, and Mel's, enchanted by the name, immediately starts calling him Lord Swald, asking permission to call him that very shyly. The character thanks the protagonist, now calling him Lord Swald, for rescuing her. Although she thinks the intervention was a bit exaggerated, she admits that without his help, she might have suffered a stroke, but she maintained that deep down she didn't need to be saved. In a more inimical tone, she expresses her desire to return the favor, offering her help and asking if there was anything he would like in return, trying to be useful to Prota. The protagonist, relieved, thinks he made the right choice in sparing the characters, as she seemed to know the way to Heartens. However, her confidence is shaken when she enthusiastically asks what Hearthstone is, He was incredulous about this situation, realizing that not only does she not know the way, but she has no idea what it is, leaving him a little frustrated. The Prota realizes that he asked precisely the person who had no idea what Hearthstone was. He changes his approach and asks for the nearest human village. The character mentions a city called Lies, which surprises him, as it is an Imperial capital, which he did not expect. He was thinking about the journey from Hastings to Lies. It takes 2 months by carriage, which makes him very confused. He realizes that he made a big mistake in his location estimate. The character tries to help him by suggesting that he use a teleportation ruby so he could get around quickly. More confused, he asks which ruby this is, indicating that he was unaware of this technology. The character explains that the teleportation ruby is an invention of humans who use magic and alchemy to transfer a person through space. Confused, our Prota asks where this device is. She reveals that the closest ruby is in Lies, confirming that the Imperial capital is the necessary destination.